Hello, welcome to this lecture on theater vocabulary. I've tried not to overload you too much this week with terms that you don't need to know and won't use, but at the same time, there are some terms that will really help us to be on the same page and to speak the same dramatic language. So let's take a look at a few theater terms. There are two terms that relate to the basics of drama that I think are very important. The first is conflict. We might think of conflict as an entirely negative thing in real life because we don't want to be in conflict with the people we know or have any of our relationships experience conflict. But in drama, conflict is absolutely necessary. Conflict is what makes a play possible when you want something but you can't get it. When you want something that is different from what another character wants. That's what makes for good story and good drama. So conflict is kind of a good thing. It's the heart of drama. And we also have genre. This is the style of theater that we're dealing with, such as drama or tragedy or comedy. Or when we get into ancient Greek theater, you'll see two different kinds of comedy. And the ancient Greeks had other genres that we don't even have today, and we have some genres quite all our own today. So genre is the style of theater that we're dealing with. Next, let's take a look at some terms that apply to acting, things that every actor needs to know. The first word is character. You might think of character as just being the name of the person that you're playing. You might say, my character is Juliet. My character is Mercutio. But when an actor talks about character, they actually mean all of the personality traits and patterns of movement, patterns of voice, and all of the little idiosyncrasies, like one character might like to constantly tuck their hair behind their ear, or one character might always be fiddling with the hem of their coat. Those little idiosyncrasies, all those little details, they go into playing a person that is different from yourself. Those are all aspects of your character. Next we have sides. These are little sections of the script that will often be given to you before an audition. So the director will say, be sure to pick up some sides before you go, or come in with the sides prepared. You don't have to memorize them, but have them prepared. So you'll have just a little tiny bit of the scene or a bit of a monologue to work on to come in and show the director something. Those are your sides. Now, sometimes you're not given sides at all. Sometimes you are asked to do what we call a cold read. A cold read is auditioning with no preparation. The actor is not given the sides ahead of time, or sometimes they haven't even read the script ahead of time because it's a new work or something like that it's not really allowed to leave the room, or they don't want copies of it to be floating around. So you'll come in and do a cold read where you just pick up the script and show them what you can do. Now, regarding auditions, there are two basic kinds. Well, there are several ways you could divide up auditions, but here's one of the ways. We have what's called an open audition and what's called a closed audition. In an open audition, everyone stays in the room and sees what happens at the audition. Sometimes this can be really interesting because sometimes it means you get to look at all the people who might be your competition. It helps you root for them more, care about how they're doing. It might help you even understand why the director cast things the way that they did. Another benefit to an open audition is that the people getting up to audition actually get to have some audience members. So the director can see, how do you perform when you're really in front of people? There's a bit more pressure or a fun audience to give you good reactions, especially if it's a comedy. But there are also some challenges to doing an open audition, which means it can make people more nervous to be performing only in front of other people who are also trying out for the same parts. And it can give people a collection of material for gossip later. They can say, no, I disagree with this casting choice because when I was sitting there, this is what I saw and this is what I noticed. So both methods have their positives and negatives. I like open auditions. I think they're fun and they can contribute to an ensemble. But a closed audition is also very traditional and a good way to go. Now after that audition, you might get what's called a callback. This is when an actor is invited back to audition again because they've made it to the next round. Sometimes there can be a whole series of callbacks. I once went to 3 callbacks for a play before finding out if I got the role or not. Okay, I got it. It was great. I was so happy. But sometimes you can put a lot of work into callbacks and then it would still not work out. You just aren't quite the right fit for the role. Now, just to be clear, there is another meaning to the word callback that has to do with when a comedian or a comic scriptwriter returns to the same joke again later on in the material. So the comedian might have said something really, really funny, and then 5 minutes later, they sort of throw that little funny line back in again. That's called a callback. Let's talk a little bit about stage directions. These are written into the script. They are the suggestions from the playwright about how the play should be performed. They're written in parentheses and in italics. It might say something like, "She crosses to the window," or "She steals his hat," or "He begins to cry." One joke that is often used in television and on stage is that a bad actor or a very young actor or new actor will read all of their lines and their stage directions out loud. It's important to note that stage directions are considered to be suggestions. The director might use them or might totally ignore them entirely, and that is up to the director. People have differing opinions about stage directions because some people say, if the playwright put it there, then it's important and we should try to honor the playwright's intentions and produce the play exactly the way the playwright wanted. Other people say, no, once the script is in our hands, we get to have some creative license with it. We get to decide how we want the characters to move, or maybe we have a slightly different interpretation. So some directors will cross out all the stage directions on the first day of rehearsal. Some directors will really read them carefully and take them seriously. So those are the stage directions. Oh, this is a very important acting term. In theater, we work with something that is called the fourth wall. And this is the imagined wall between the actor and the audience. Usually when an actor stares out toward the audience, they don't look into the eyes of the people that are sitting there. They imagine that they see things on that fourth wall. They might look up and they see a clock, or they see a sunset, or they see other people in the distance. And usually it's important that you don't break that fourth wall. You don't ever let the audience see that you know they're there. You pretend the audience isn't there. But in some styles of theater, you intentionally break the fourth wall, and you go and you speak directly to the audience. We see that a lot in Shakespeare. His characters go back and forth all the time, seeing things in the distance and then breaking the fourth wall and talking directly to the groundlings and the other audience members, and it's very fun. So it's important to know what kind of style of theater you're doing, because if you accidentally break the fourth wall when you shouldn't, then it looks a lot less professional. Now we have a special word for all of the movements that actors do on stage. Things like walking to the window, or sitting down in a chair, or moving over to shake someone's hand. All of these movements are called your blocking. Blocking is the movements assigned to an actor, where they stand, when they move, and what they do when they get there. That's your blocking. And you always want to write your blocking down. Usually in one of the very first rehearsals, you'll have a blocking rehearsal where the director tells you all those little details of how to move, and you don't want to forget them. You don't want to be the person who shows up on week 2 and says, I can't remember when I walked to the window. So it's very important to write down all of your blocking and then memorize it at home. Next, we have a prop. A prop is any item that is picked up and moved by an actor. A cup, a book, a blanket, and one of the biggest rules in theater, a bit of stage etiquette, backstage etiquette really, is to never, ever, ever touch another actor's prop, because horrible things can happen if you pick up a teacup and set it down in not quite the right spot. Then someone comes running backstage in the dark, and they go to pick up the teacup, and it's gone. So never touch another actor's prop. Motivation. This is a wonderful acting term, and you see it brought up in comedies a lot, where an actor will say, "What's my motivation?" And your motivation is the reason. It's why a character does what they do. So my motivation for walking over to the window, it might be because I'm worried and I want to search for my child. My motivation for walking over to the window might be because I'm uncomfortable with all of the people in the room and I want to get away from them. My motivation might be that I want to throw something out the window before anybody can see it. And all of these motivations will completely change the way it looks when I walk to the window. So it's important to know, what is your motivation? Now here I'm going to get into a few complicated acting terms, but I think you can handle them. One of them is action. This is the tactic that a character will use to get what they want. An action is usually a verb. I'm going to escape, to win, to upset, to confront, to protect, to threaten. But whatever I do, it's because I'm trying to accomplish something. So if you're acting on stage and the director starts to think it looks a little bit unmotivated, it looks a little boring, or he or she thinks there can be a stronger dramatic choice, then the director might say, try that, but instead of trying to protect her, try to confront her. And we'll see how that action changes the way the scene plays out. It can be a really fun acting method. Next we have subtext. This is the hidden meaning of a line. It's the things that aren't being said. For example, my line might be, "It's good to see you." But the subtext might be that I haven't seen this person in 10 years and I am worried that they might have a bad reason for their visit. I might be very apprehensive. If that's the subtext, then when I say, "It's good to see you," it changes quite a bit. So one trick that some actors use is they go through all of their lines fairly early in the process, but after they've really come to understand the other characters in the play, and they write in tiny little letters the subtext of the lines, the things they're really thinking and feeling. And then that helps to deepen their performance and make it more nuanced and more interesting. Next, we have your objective. That's what you want most. What's your objective in the play? Or sometimes you have a super objective, your entire goal for the entire show. Your objective is, what are you after? What are you trying to get? Objective and action work together. So if I want to win this competition, my objective is to win, then my action might be to threaten. I'm going to threaten this other character so I can win. Next we have your cue. The cue is an actor's signal to talk. It's the line or the effect or the thing that happens right before it's time for you to speak. So your cue could be, there's a knock at the door, and then you say, "I'll get it." Your cue could be, one actor passes out on stage and faints, and you say, "Alas, oh no," and you go help them. Then that was your cue. Almost always your cue is just someone else finished talking, so now it's your turn to talk. That was your cue. Now there's a signal that you're going to hear from the stage manager when it's time for the play to begin, and that is places. That means the play is started and that actors need to be in their opening positions getting ready for the very first scene of the play. Oh, this one's very important, and it's a term that beginning actors don't tend to know, but it really has an effect on performance. This is what's called the moment before. The moment before is what an actor imagines was taking place just before they walked on stage. So for example, if you've been out wrestling in the snow and you come into the house, then your moment before, you are cold, you are running, you are breathing hard, your cheeks might be red from the running, and your hands are a little bit numb, but you're laughing and happy, and then you come into the house. Oh, can you imagine how that looks? How it feels as an actor? Well, what a newer actor will tend to do is just walk on stage. They won't really look as if anything was happening while they were standing outside the stage. But if you think of your moment before, it will make your entrance really interesting for the audience, and you'll be much more believable as a character. Next we have a command that is often given to actors, project! It's spelled like project, but it's actually a verb. To project means not just to be louder, but to make your movements, your emotions, and your voice big enough that audience members in the back of the theater can understand the whole story and can pick up on your emotions. So if it's just not quite big enough, the director might shout at you, project! Another great theater term, because this one has such a different meaning in the non-theater world, is the term cheat. In theater, cheating is actually a good thing. This means that you tilt your body toward the audience. Even if you have to pretend to look at the person that you're acting with, you just sort of cheat a little. You're not really looking at them. You might also hear a director say, "Cheat out," or "Open up." And that just means turn your body a little bit so the audience can see your face and see your body. Sometimes cheating feels a little strange before you get used to it, because you'll have to walk up to one actor and shake their hand and look them in the eye, but the whole time you're turning your body just a little bit, almost like a character in an Egyptian painting, and that's called cheating. And we need to do that to help the audience see our bodies and our faces. It helps them hear, it helps with many things. Cheating is very important, but only in that way. Next we have what's called being on book. This comes from many, many moons ago, when most actors didn't get to hold a whole copy of the script. They only had their own lines written down, and someone, a prompter, would sit off stage with the book, and they would be speaking the lines to anybody who got lost or couldn't remember their line. So to be on book, that can mean that your lines are not yet memorized, and you still need to hold your script. Or it can mean that someone is sitting with the script and helping by giving a line. If you say line, they'll help you. That means you're still on book. Off book is when an actor has memorized their lines and no longer needs to hold a script or to have anyone else be on book to help them. And really, this is when the fun of theater gets started. It's tricky when an actor doesn't get off book until the last week or so of the show, because then they only really get to do in-depth work for that last week. It's frustrating for the others. It's important, if you are ever in a play scenario, a chance to rehearse a play, that you get off book as soon as you can, maybe a week after blocking rehearsals. Speaking of rehearsals, our next term is the tech rehearsal. This is a rehearsal that tends to run really late at night. It's usually the only time when a director will keep actors late. So much so that you're thinking, oh, I have to go home. I'm getting tired. I need my dinner. But tech rehearsals can sometimes be all day. Like you might come in all day on a Saturday. And this is a rehearsal that focuses on the technical elements of the show. Getting the lights just right, trying out the special effects, lining up the sound cues. And it's very strange. I think that I always compliment the technicians or the techies, because they really only get the big tech rehearsal. Actors sometimes practice for weeks, for months, sometimes a whole semester. And then at the very end, in the last week or so, the techies get one big tech rehearsal. And that's almost all they get, because after that, they can't stop the show. They're supposed to just keep going. So tech rehearsals can be difficult on actors and arduous, and there's a lot of times when they'll say, hold, and you just have to stand there while they fix a light and then do it again, and they'll say, hold, and they fix something else and you do it again. It can be exhausting for an actor, but it's so important, and the best thing you can do at a tech rehearsal is just be meditative and be a calming influence on the rest of the cast, and just stay quiet so the technicians can do their work. Remember, it's the only chance that they get. They have to be really good at their jobs. Next we get dress rehearsals. This is when all of the technical elements are in place and we're going to do the show again, but this time with makeup and costumes. Sometimes you only get one big dress rehearsal, but I would say it's more typical to get 2 to 4 of them. And then one more. After the play is over, we have what's called strike. This is the act of clearing a theater. You break down the set, you put away the costumes, you return all of your borrowed items, so that a show is now officially cleared and finished. That's your strike. Now for this next section, I want to talk a little bit about some of the jobs in the theater. My guess is that you know most of these, or that they won't be too hard to memorize. We have the playwright. That's spelled Playwright. Now, a wright, a Wright, is a person who practices a craft. A person who works on carts might be a cartwright. A person who works on ships might be a shipwright. A person who writes plays is a playwright. There's a common mistake with this term because it sounds just like playwright, like a writer. But you should try to get this term right. Haha. Next we have the house manager. Now the house manager is in charge of everything to do with the audience. When the audience can come inside, how the seating is managed, whether or not you can come in late to the theater, that's all handled by your house manager. The director. The director is the boss, and there's only one. And one of the biggest rules in all of theater is that actors don't direct other actors. And this is such a tricky lesson to learn. I know that I struggled with it a great deal. I still do. Because if you feel your acting partner struggling, or you can tell you're pretty sure that they're not doing something right, it feels like a good idea to let them know in a gentle way and sort of show them how they could do it differently or how they might improve. But it's such a bad trap to fall into. It almost always goes badly, and it leads to resentment. Because that actor might be in a different place than you. They might have a different concept of the character than you have. So even if you're right, even if you really know that you're right, actors don't direct other actors. Now next we have the stage manager. The stage manager is responsible for running all of the technical elements of the show. It's traditional and respectful to echo what a stage manager says, to indicate that you heard it. If a stage manager walks past you and says, 10 minutes to places, then you would say, thank you, 10. If the stage manager says, places, then you would say, thank you, places. It's a very organized, respectful, and traditional way to behave with your stage manager. Next, we have a group of people who are so important in the theater, and they have many names. You might call them stagehands, or the stage crew, or the running crew, or techies, or technicians. But generally, those terms all refer to the same group of people, and they are the ones who make things happen backstage. They are the people getting you a quick change into your new costume, or they are making special effects work with really interesting technical elements like dry ice, or they are preparing all of the food that actors actually eat on stage, or doing all manner of jobs to make you as the actor look good and to make the show run smoothly. Now, you should of course always be kind to everyone that you encounter and be respectful to everyone that you encounter, but it's especially important to be kind to your stage crew. Like I said, they're working for you. They're making the actors look good, and they rarely get any credit for it. They don't tend to get applause at the end of the show. They don't get a chance to run out and bow for the audience. They wear all black so that they look the same and so that they kind of run around and not be seen. So they don't exactly get the glory, but stage crew definitely deserves our respect and our thanks. Next, I'd like to talk just a bit about the types of stages that you will see in a theater. First, we have the amphitheater, and we'll talk about amphitheaters in the ancient Greek theater unit that's coming up soon. This is an outdoor venue, often with curved seating, in which actors perform in the open air. Next, we have perhaps the most traditional form of theater, which is called the proscenium, or the proscenium arch. This is a stage that makes it look like the audience is looking in through a window. It's a big rectangle, and the audience looks through it. Next, we have the thrust, or thrust stage. This stage, just like the name suggests, it thrusts out into the audience, so the actors can walk out and take several steps closer to the audience. It's more intimate because the audience surrounds the performers on 3 sides. Next, we have what's called arena staging, or theater in the round. This time, the audience completely surrounds the stage. It can be really tricky for actors that have been trained never to turn their backs on the audience. But it can also be an interesting form of theater because depending on where you sit, you get a completely different show. And you get to have, you might have one character's perspective but not another's, or get to look into this person's eyes but not this person's. So performing theater in the round and watching theater in the round can have an added air of mystery. Next we have what's called a black box. This is a small and flexible performance space that can be shifted around to meet the needs of each show. If you don't have a lot of money at all, then you might especially be doing black box theater. It's very flexible and very basic, and often in a little black room. And last, we have a type of stage that can exist in almost any of these, which is called a raked stage. This is a stage that has been built on a slant, so that it tilts toward the audience. Now you can also have a raked house, and this is when the audience area tilts toward the performers. Let's talk a bit about a few elements of the stage. First, you need to know about the house. This is where the audience lives. Well, it's where they sit. So if someone says, "Why don't you jump off the stage into the house?" what they mean is, go jump into the audience. But theater people never say the audience. They say the house. We also have in the theater wings. These are the hidden areas of the stage. On the left side and on the right side, they're the sides. They're where the actors stand just before they enter. I like to think of them as two bird wings or two angel wings that stretch off into the sides of the stage. Now, above the actors' heads, we have what's called the fly space. This is the open area above the stage where lights and scenery are hung. In a full theater, a theater with all the budget in the world, the fly space is twice the height of the performance space, so that you can raise the set pieces all the way in and all the way back out again without the audience ever seeing them. That's why a lot of theaters are so very tall from the outside, and then you get inside and they look a bit smaller. It's because of the fly space. There's a special curtain in the theater, several of them actually, and they all have names, and I'm not going to tell you the name of every curtain, but there are a few of them that you should know. The first is the traveler. This is the curtain that stretches along the upstage wall. What is upstage? Well, I'm glad you asked. We will get to that later. But what you need to know for now is that the traveler opens and closes. It travels. It travels along the wall that's farthest away from the audience. Another special curtain to know about is what's called the legs. These are long, thin curtains, just like legs that are tall and thin, and they help hide what's in the wings. So those little black curtains that hang down on the wings, those are called the legs. And a common joke in theater is that people get tangled up in the legs. They're trying so hard to make their exit, but they can't see, or they're making their entrance, but they're nervous, and they get tangled up in the legs. Another special curtain that we use is called the scrim. And this curtain is made from an open weave fabric that seems opaque. It seems dark if you light it from the front, but it's transparent when a person or object behind it is lit. So it can help you create really interesting stage effects, like shadows or people that are in a mysterious room, or people that are supposed to be swimming underwater. You can make them look like they're under a misty space if you light them behind the scrim. We have the backdrop. You might have several backdrops in a show. This is a painted curtain that hangs in the back of the stage to indicate scenery. So you might have a castle backdrop or a forest backdrop. Now, the best name ever for a curtain in the theater is the cyclorama, or sometimes it's just called the cyc. It is a large curtain, often concave, with a little curve in it, at the very back of the stage, and you can light it to represent the sky or sunsets or other backgrounds. So it's traditionally white or another natural colored cloth like a light beige, and it becomes beautiful deep skies and all sorts of effects without ever really needing to be painted. You never paint the cyclorama, but by lighting it correctly, you can completely change the mood of the theater, of the stage. We also have flats. A flat is a thin rectangular board that's been painted to look like the setting. not always a full board. Sometimes it just has fabric stretched across it and the fabric is painted. But it's always a rectangle. And the flats might be placed all over the stage and it looks like a castle, but really it's just these thin little walls. It's just flats. We have battens. Batten is a pole from which lights or scenery are hung. But we would never say, hang it on the pole. We would say, hang it from the batten. I'm sure you've heard this term, but it has a different meaning in much of the world when we use it, and that's catwalk. You might have heard catwalk referenced in terms of fashion shows, or when supermodels come walking down the catwalk, or there's even an old song that features the word catwalk. But what it is in the theater is a narrow area far above the stage where designers and stage crew can crawl or walk, if you have a really tall catwalk, to adjust the scenery and the lights. Most actors never get a chance to go up on the catwalk. And in really old theaters, this can be a scary space, a very thin, narrow space where you really do have to crawl, and it can feel almost unsafe. But in very new, modern theaters, the catwalk just feels like a long balcony, and there are plenty of safety bars, although it's still very high. And we call that the catwalk. Another term, it's not really part of the theater, but it becomes part of the stage, and I think it's important for you to know it, is spike, or spike tape. We use spiking when we need to know where an object is supposed to go. So you place a small little piece of tape in an exact spot, that's called spiking it, so that the actors and set pieces can always land in the perfect spot and be in the correct lights. And you can imagine this if someone has worked really hard to focus this perfect blue light on you so it looks like you're standing in the moonlight, and then you run on stage and you accidentally stand 3 feet too far to the left. And you feel like, I think I'm in pretty much the right spot, but you're not. So it's important to do what's called hitting your mark, and you might hit your mark by landing on some spike tape. You might tell yourself, I need to stand on that little blue bit of spike. Or let's say you have to carry on a table in the dark and put it out in the stage in the exact same spot every night. Well, that's really hard to do in the dark. So sometimes we have glow-in-the-dark spike tape, or tape that's just bright enough, little bits of blue, little bits of red. All of Act 1 might have red spike tape, but all of Act 2 might have blue spike tape. Those things just help the show to be the same every time you do it. So spiking is really important, and most audience members never even notice it. But when you go to a theater, next time you have the chance, take a look up close on the stage, and you'll see little tiny bits of tape, all different colors, all over the stage, and the actors and the stage crew have been using it the whole time. That's their spiking. And lastly, for areas in the theater, you should know about the green room. This is where the actors sit and await their entrances. They don't just sit in the wings for the whole time, not usually. Now, the green room isn't always green. There are many theories about where that term comes from. None of them have ever satisfied me, but suffice it to say, that place backstage, the one room where you really can talk and have a bit of conversation if needed, is all the way back in the green room. And sometimes, if you're a very special VIP, you might actually get to go talk to the actors in the green room after the show. Not everyone can meet there, but a small group can. Now, it's important to talk a little bit about stage directions. For example, what happens when a director tells an actor, move to the right? Well, do they mean the actor's right or the director's right? This can be very confusing, especially if you're new. And here's how we solve this problem, and how we make it easy on actors. Stage left. That's the actor's left when facing the audience. Stage right. That's the actor's right when facing the audience. And these don't move, they don't change. So if you're an actor and you turn your back, stage left is still your left if you were facing the audience, and stage right is still your right if you were facing the audience. Then we have upstage and downstage. Upstage is the area furthest away from the audience, and downstage is the area closest to the audience. And there's a really easy way to remember this. Remember that raked stage that I told you about? A stage that has been tilted just a little bit? Well, if you imagine that every stage is raked, if I placed a ball upstage, it would roll downstage. Make sense? We also have a very special part of the stage called center stage, and this is the exact middle of the stage. So, a way to get yourself used to this is I like to imagine the stage as a tic-tac-toe game. We have upstage left, USL. We have upstage center, USC. Upstage right, USR. Left stage center, or center stage left. People sometimes put those in a different order. LSC. We have center center, just a C. Right stage center, or stage right center, RSC. Downstage left, DSL. Downstage center, DSC. And downstage right, DSR. I know I took an awfully long time to go through those, but those are the 9 basic parts of the stage. Now, if you know one more little bit about blocking and stage directions, then you can write all of your stage directions really easily. The last little piece you need to know is called a cross. This is when you move from one side of the stage to the next, when you cross to a different part of the stage, and it's abbreviated with an X. Now, this system helps actors to write down their blocking quickly and cleanly and easily during those blocking rehearsals. For example, instead of writing, I move closer to the table in the front left part of the stage to ask her why she's being so rude. They can write their blocking and their motivation like this. XDSL to confront. That's cross downstage left to confront. Boom! Wasn't that more clean? More simple? Writing down stage directions during blocking rehearsal is awesome. And lastly, I'd like to close up this little vocabulary lecture with a few words that have to do with theater tradition. The first one, the lovely one, is break a leg. And this phrase is used to wish an actor good luck before a show. In fact, it's really the only one we use because theater superstition says that if you wish an actor good luck, you're actually wishing them bad luck. There are many theories about where this phrase comes from. It could mean, I hope you have so many curtain calls that the curtains, the legs, break from being raised and lowered so many times. But my favorite theory is that break a leg is slang for the formal Elizabethan bow. In Elizabethan plays, audiences were dangerously interactive. They would shout at the actors and throw rotten food at the actors they didn't like. However, if you were really good, then you could make it to the end of the show and have a chance to take a bow or break a leg. Another theater tradition is that you never whistle in a theater. This was the old signal for stagehands to raise or lower a big, heavy set piece. So if you whistle in a theater, you just might cause a set piece to fall on someone's head. At least, that's the tradition. There's also a word you never say in the theater, and it's so much so that some actors feel a little nervous and squirmy even saying it outside of a theater. But you're never supposed to say Macbeth. There are many old stories of terrible things happening during productions of Shakespeare's Macbeth, and the show itself is full of creepy elements like ghosts and witches, and if you do say that word, then superstition holds that you will curse the show that is being rehearsed now. And if you do that, then you may need to exit the theater and be invited back in again. Instead, always say, the Scottish play. And lastly, we have something in the theater that we call the ghost light. And the ghost light actually exists for very important safety reasons, because theaters are one of the only spaces where we get what's called true blackout. That means there's no light coming in from windows or from underneath doors or from the other room, because it's important that we be able to completely turn the lights off. That means being in a darkened theater can be really dangerous. There are orchestra pits you can fall into, and it can be very hard to find your way in or out. Very easy to get injured in a great big theater in the dark. Very easy to fall off of something or onto something. So when a theater goes into black, we always leave this tiny light sitting on the stage burning. It's to keep everyone safe. But there's also a traditional superstition that it chases all the ghosts away and keeps the theater safe. So you always want to leave the ghost light burning.